The Washington Unos. Do I say the nickname or do I risk it? Whatever. We'll call them Washington. Well, actually, I should say the Washington Redskins because I said Cleveland Indians several times. So anyway, yeah, Washington's inoffensive nickname, blah blah blah, whatever. Anyway, Washington started out in Boston. Boston had the Redskins franchise, and then they moved it to Washington in 1933. Hail to the Redskins. Washington had been really much involved in football and all that. Mostly at a time when baseball really wasn't that king in Washington, or basically forgotten. The NHL wasn't really started till their NHL team wasn't until '75, and their basketball team wasn't until the '60s. Washington were the kings of football. Heck, they played some great NFL championship games against the Chicago Bears. If memory serves me right, I believe they trounced the Bears 73-0 in one NFL title game and all that. No, sorry, it was the Bears doing the same thing because they said that the PA announcer announced about the 1941 season tickets when they were getting robbed. The Redskins were kind of a decent team. They weren't like super duper team. Washington really didn't get much support from the sports cities. In fact, it seemed like it was bad. They're the best team in town, but they couldn't do anything. Washington got to Super Bowl 7 against the Miami Dolphins at the LA Coliseum in 1973. The Redskins were decent. Unfortunately, they lost to the Dolphins. Well, the Dolphins were nursing a perfect season, and they won 14-7 against the powerful Dolphins. So Redskins got a touchdown thanks to Mike Bass's return of a touchdown of a stupid Garo Yepremian play that he thought he would try to pass the ball after a blocked kick. Unfortunately, he should have just sat down on it. But the Redskins didn't score any more points. So the Dolphins did get their undefeated season. Washington had some decent teams and all that. But it wasn't until the late 70s when basically sentiment went out the window and the new Washington management crew finally got their quarterback, Joe Theismann, who basically was mishandled in his first few years. He was just basically the punter and kick returner, if you will. They used Theismann for that role, terrible roles, and he was a pretty good quarterback at Notre Dame. So anyway, Washington back in 1982 had a great team that won the Super Bowl over the Miami Dolphins, led by Joe Theismann, led by some great wide receivers nicknamed the Smurfs, Art Monk among them, the fun bunch, if you will. The Hogs, the offensive line that had Mark May, Joe Jacoby on it, among others. And John Reagan's power slamming things in that Super Bowl with a 70-plus yard run, which would then be broken by Marcus Allen the next year for the Raiders. The Redskins were on top. Heck, they even had the MVP. Not Joe Theismann. The MVP was Mark Mosley, the kicker. Huh? How can you name a kicker an MVP? I don't know, but it's the NFL. Besides, the 82 season was the lockout shortened season that they only had 9 games, and basically the NFL had to scramble to fill their Sunday things. One never had baseball, one never had movies, and one never decided to try their hand at the CFL. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. So practically, that wasn't good. But the World Series came along, and they decided to do games in the afternoon because, after all, baseball wasn't doing any fights with the NFL. Let's do it. So anyway, the Redskins came back the next year to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, the Raiders ran him over. Marcus Allen did the jump, and Washington tried to fake Oakland out of their socks with a fake play to Joe Washington. It was successful in the regular season against the Raiders, but unfortunately, the Raiders saw that coming, and Jack Squire touchdown, game over. The Redskins would have some decent marks in the 80s. Heck, they got to Super Bowl 22 against the Denver Broncos on the arm of Doug Williams After Joe Theismann got leg fucked in the 1985 Monday Night Football game at LT, Lawrence Taylor, the Redskins thought they had a quarterback in Jay Schroeder, but then they had Doug Williams, who refused to stay in Tampa because the owner, Hugh House, wasn't paying him enough, and also some racism was involved, I bet. Doug Williams became the first black quarterback to lead his team to the Super Bowl. He came in for the ineffective Jay Schroeder. And the second quarter of that Super Bowl, he came alive, helping the Redskins score 5 touchdowns in that quarter after being down 10-0 to the Denver Broncos, winning the game 42-10. Washington would come back 4 years later and beat the Buffalo Bills at the Metrodome 37-24, mostly because Buffalo lost its things. So anyway, Washington started out that year 11-0. Mark Rippon. The offensive line was still there. The defense was still there. Washington, unfortunately, hit that high 92 and haven't really recovered since. Sure, they tried with free agent splash signings. Owner Dan Snyder, who basically wanted free agents instead of building the team through the draft. All that. A decent stadium that really wasn't really a good stadium. The Redskins haven't really been doing that well. They've had a few playoff runs in the past 10 years, but nothing major to talk about. So let's talk about the Washington team that I put in this thing. A team that did make the Super Bowl. Heck, they didn't even make the playoffs. You're thinking, quoi? That's right. The 1978 Washington Redskins started out 6-0. Heck, they even had a Monday night game played in front of the president, Jimmy Carter. Fuck that guy. So anyway, the Redskins were 6-0. Unfortunately, they had a coach, Jack Pardee, who basically was player first. After all, Pardee did take part in the 1972 Super Bowl, but he wasn't much of a player. He was a player's coach more than a team's coach. Washington just basically fell flat. You go from 6-0 to 8-8 and not make the playoffs that year. It's just disgusting. And the fact of the matter is that this was the first NFL playoffs, 1978-79, to have 10 teams in the Super Bowl, 5 from each conference. What they did is set up 2 wildcard teams. The 2 best wildcard teams would face each other in a 1-game playoff to decide who would face the number 1 seed. Now, the problem with this is something I found out thanks to Wiki. It says that the number 1 seed would not play the winner of the wildcard game, whoever that is, if they're from the same division. So, in real life, in the 78-79 playoffs, Houston beat Miami 17-9. Houston was the 5 seed, Miami was number 4. So Houston went to New England to face the AFC Central champion, the East champion, excuse me. Now, if Miami had won that wildcard game, they would have faced the number 1 seed. That was Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was the 1 seed. New England was the 2 seed. So it would have been Miami versus Pittsburgh if Miami had won that wildcard game, and then Denver versus New England. Who knows what would have happened? But anyway, the NFC wildcard game had Atlanta beat Philadelphia. The bad news for Atlanta is that they were in the same conference as the number 1 seed, that being the LA Rams. If Philly had won that wildcard game, they would have been playing the Rams, with the Cowboys placing the Vikings at Texas Stadium. Strange as it sounds, it's just weird. However, yeah, I know. I completely forgot that there was they had the 10-team playoff for many years, till 1990 when they added the 3rd wildcard to make 2 wildcard games into the 2 divisional rounds. So anyway, it gives me conflict. The Washington Redskins started at 6-0 and then dropped to 8-8. They'll take over the Philadelphia spot because, same division. So the Redskins will play the Falcons. Now, the problem is that, if Atlanta wins, they play Dallas and all that. Although Atlanta's number 4 and Dallas is number 2. But I have to keep historical balance. So, here's what I'm going to do. If Washington does beat Atlanta, Washington will play Los Angeles. which means Minnesota will play Dallas. Now, I know for a fact that Dallas went to the NFC title game over Atlanta, but Dallas went to the NFC title game. So Dallas will get the win over Minnesota. The Redskins will play the Rams. And if the Redskins would lose to the Rams, then obviously Dallas versus Los Angeles, and then we can have for clarity. Remember, the AFC is untouched, so Pittsburgh will be waiting for the Super Bowl. But that's only if the Redskins win. Remember, the Redskins have to beat the Falcons and all that. So that's what we're going to do. It's weird seeing Atlanta at 97 with such players such as Haskell Stanback and Bubba Bean. Bubba Bean, Bubba Bean, Bubba Bean. Well, good news for Redskin fans. They win 15-7. Actually, that's kind of a mistake. That's a mistake, though. It's not supposed to be at the Georgia Dome. It was supposed to be at Atlanta Felton County Stadium because that's the home of the Falcons before 92. Anyway, Jake Scott is the MVP. Well, he was a defender. Jake Scott, the guy from Miami who was Super Bowl VII MVP, played for the Redskins? Weird. So anyway, Mosley kicks a few field goals. Barkowski throws a pass to Jim Mitchell for a touchdown. John Riggins gets a touchdown run. They missed the 2-point convert, and then Mosley ends it 15-7. Well, June Jones, the Hawaii coach, he came in at quarterback 0 for 2. Joe Theismann didn't throw a touchdown pass. He threw 3 interceptions, and they still won, mostly because of the field goal kicker. I guess times were different. If memory serves me right, 78 was the first year that they gave more power to the passing offenses by making defensive players more accountable and give more defensive penalties if you bump a receiver 5 yards or more downfield. So 3 interceptions by both teams. Pridemore, Reed, and Roland Lawrence for Atlanta with field. Jake Scott got all 3 interceptions. Wow. Tim Massetti was the quarterback for the Washington Redskins. Wow. Nice job, Massetti. Nice job indeed. So he missed 2 37-yard field goals. Mosley hit a 37-yarder and a 51 and a 44. Yeah, they didn't do a really good job. So Washington plays the LA Rams. That's what it is. They were the Rams were the 1 seed anyway, so 88 versus 12-4 at home team, 70 degrees. That sounds about right. Sounds about right. And it doesn't feel right. The Redskins fall at the second hurdle to the Rams, who then lose to the Cowboys in the NFC title game, which Dallas ends up winning the Super Bowl. And the Skins had a 10-0 lead after 1 quarter. Mosley with a touchdown. With a field goal. John McDaniel with a 45-yard touchdown run. But then the Rams cut down them. Coral with a pair of field goals. Willie Miller gets a touchdown for Pat Hayden. Cappelletti with a touchdown catch. And also a touchdown run. So Cappelletti, I think, would be the player of the game. Yep. 119 on the ground. Remember, Cappelletti was that Penn State running back who won the Heisman and had his brother deal with leukemia. So, yeah, what a day. John McDaniel, 1 run. And that was a touchdown. Theismann did terrible. 6 for 15, 87 yards. Good grief. They weren't a running, passing team. Pat Hayden, much better. 14 for 27, 250. 2 touchdowns and a pick. The pick by Joe Williams. At least this time, Joe Theismann didn't throw an interception. Mark Mosley missed a 46-yard field goal, but of little consequence. So the Redskins. Washington choked. Washington choked. Washington choked. To quote the great Chris Schenkel when he did the NFL Films stuff.